I had a daughter, newborn, while I was in school, and she was having a lot of trouble sleeping and seemed to be, really colicky. And I talked to one of my professors and said, hey, what can be done? What kind of acupuncture can you do on a newborn? Just looking for something to help. And this instructor says, oh, I got this technique. Bring her to my office. And so we went to his office. He pulls out the meter and he does the Ryota Raku measurements on an infant, right? And sure enough, everything measures out. He can pinpoint what's going on. And then he treats with a laser, which we'll talk maybe about lasers too, because I'm really into optics and really into light therapy. But he treats her with a laser and things improve. And, I was glad my daughter got better. But it's confession time, right? I was a lot more excited about what the hell did you just do? What is this? You've got this machine. You're measuring what now? Talk to me about the resistance. Is this ohms? What are we doing? And
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. You know how it is at times in the clinic. You're listening to your patient. They have their teeth into something vital. You're not sure where they're headed with it, but they've got this scent of something. You can feel it with a sense of grace and danger. Sometimes our patients are trotting into territory that has you feeling the howl of the abyss. The other day, a patient was sharing her keen awareness of how we are conscious not just of our eventual demise, but aware as well of the constant deterioration and rot as we age and find ourselves melting away. She didn't say it, but I thought, how do we sit with the impossibility of being human without becoming nihilistic? It can be so easy to dismiss it all with a wave of the hand. Give up the present moment because it all goes away. So why bother? To look at the sadness, loss, and discrepancies and decide the unfairness of life? It's not worth the engagement. We're strange creatures that delight in hate when it's for a just cause. We craft meaning out of what we stand against. Without the whetstone of, air quotes here, the they, we've got nothing to sharpen our edge. We're born into a world that we didn't ask for and plenty often don't understand. Furthermore, don't like. Dissatisfaction, it runs deep with us sapiens. And here's the thing. That sense of dissatisfaction, it's often what drives those creative and courageous enough to create changes in the direction that they would like to see. Look around where you are right now. You're likely surrounded with things or amenities that come from the imagination of someone who's trying to make things better. Maybe that's part of the antidote to nihilism. Find something that you'd like to make better, roll up your sleeves, and get to work. Perhaps it does not add length to your days, but sure as hell, it will make the quality of those days profoundly different. Tinkering and creating. I suspect that anyone who's been lucky enough to have grown up in an environment that encouraged exploration, risk-taking, and curiosity, they've got a perspective that has them asking, why not, instead of why. Figuring out how things work, it's fun. Even more so when you don't take other people's word on what's doable and what's not, and instead, you go and see for yourself. Adrian Larsen has been one of those how's this thing work kind of people his entire life. That's led him to all kinds of interesting projects, one of which was the creation of the Acugraph. It's great when curious people push an edge and find a whole new territory to share with the rest of us. We'll learn more about how the Acugraph came about, as well as how it can be used right after this message from the folks that make it possible for Geological to be streaming into your ears. Stay with us. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AccuFast needles. And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lyle, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com. And where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AccuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit AccuFastNeedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
Adrian Larsen, welcome to Qiological.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I am thrilled to have you. You're a gadget guy, aren't you?
I am a gadget guy, and I always have been. We'll get into that, I'm sure.
Okay. So you work with the Acugraph, which is a pretty interesting gadget. Measures meridians. Sounds like magic.
To a great degree it is, because when you really wrap your head around what it does and what it can give you, it really is magic. But maybe that's down the line a little bit. We gotta talk a little bit about how we got there, and there's a lot of ground to cover, Michael.
I know there's a lot of ground to cover. And, it's interesting. I can still remember years ago when I was in school, I think the Acugraph was still around like 25 years ago, wasn't it? It's been around a long time.
2003 was when we launched the business and launched the product. So we're a little over 20 years now.
Okay, so there must have been something else that was alluded to when I was in school. So I'm thinking of something different.
Yeah. No, the technique's been around since 1950. So yeah, there's been stuff.
Okay. Anyway, when I was in school, I was just trying to learn how to read pulses. and look at tongues and just try to somehow grok who somebody was so I could treat them. And I looked at this machine and thought, could that be helpful? It might be helpful. Would it hinder me in becoming a practitioner? I don't know. I think I'm going to stick with my hands first and maybe investigate these other things later. But, life gets involved, and the next thing you know, you're way down the road into a career. I've never played around with one of these things, although I've heard of them. So I want to get into it because, look, I'm a guy, and something we all know about guys is we like boxes with blinky light switches, dials, probe, that kind of, I don't know what it is. It goes with the male brain.
No, and when you said that, the first time I talked to you, you described yourself as that. You said, I love boxes with blinky lights and switches. And that there's something about expressing it that way that, I don't know, speaks to the soul of guys like you and me. And I'm like, yes, he gets me.
Well, let's start with you then. How did you get started with the blinky lights? Were you like playing around with Christmas lights and cigar boxes and batteries and, making ham radios and stuff like that?
All of the above. I mean, as it happens, you said Christmas lights. It made me think of something in elementary school on Valentine's Day. We would make boxes to put on our desks so that we can go around and hand out Valentines in the classroom, and I put Christmas lights on like in my box, and I had the only light up box in the room, and everybody's like, this guy's getting no Valentines because he's a nerd. But I started out and just got interested in electronics at a really young age. True story, for my 10th birthday, I asked for a car battery for my birthday. I didn't have a car or anything, but I needed it to power my robot. And you're going, what robot? Well, okay, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I was 7 years old when Star Wars came out. The Star Wars, the one true Star Wars, not all the wannabe Star Warses since that time. And so I guess now we have to say A New Hope. Anyway, you got these androids. You got C-3PO and R2-D2. And R2-D2 looks like a rolling trash can with a dome lid. So I said, well, golly, I can go get a metal trash can down at the hardware store and build a platform with like motorized wheels and blinky lights. And I did. I built this trash can robot. And it was powered by a car battery down in the bottom of the trash can, and I had a remote control, and it would drive around and light. And by the time I was 12, I was doing birthday parties. People would like pay to have the robot come to the birthday party, and all the kids thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I was in the robotics club.
So like instead of a clown, you've got the nerd with the robot.
Yeah. I don't have a pony, I don't have a clown. I can't juggle, but I've got a robot. And so,
with a car battery. Oh, I need a car battery.
Yeah, made of an honest to goodness, silver galvanized trash can, right? So I always was just interested in that stuff, self-taught, just kind of learned as I went. And then I got into more electronic types of things and soldering together projects and things like that. There used to be a company called Heathkit where you could build your own electronics. Yeah, you buy the kit and you build it yourself. And so I did a bunch of the Heathkit stuff and everything. Anyway, so that's always kind of been a thing. But, then life caught up, and high school and college, and I got married and had kids. And so I was always a hands-on tinkering kind of guy. That's why when I started to study acupuncture, it just lit up my brain because, wait a minute, this is the circuitry. The nervous system did not interest me at all, but the meridian system was just, wow, check it out. This is where the energy flows. This is the wiring.
That's so interesting because generally speaking, people would think of the nervous system as the wiring. Like most people with a Western perspective that you and I grew up with, so we can't avoid it, we go, oh yeah, nervous system, that's where the electrical stuff is. In fact, it runs on electricity, the damn thing does.
No, so there's something so medical about that. And I've always been more into the esoteric, more into the subtle energies. Nervous system is so electrical that it's almost boring.
Just not that interesting like that. It's not the droid we're looking for.
Exactly. It's not. Boy, I couldn't have put it better. And so there's no magic in there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like with the background you have, I'm thinking, How come you're not working for Tesla? Or not Tesla, SpaceX, like working on rocketry stuff like that. But no, you were interested in esoteric things.
I'm hands-on. I don't want to design the stuff. I mean, I can force my brain to do that kind of work, but I like to build the stuff, tinker with the stuff. So, I don't take my car to the garage or to the shop. I do my own car repairs to this day.
Really? What kind of car do you have?
Oh, well, I have 7 kids, so there's a whole motor pool at my house.
I mean, are these like late model cars or are these like old cars with carburetors? I mean, I get old cars you can put your hands on. New ones are tough.
The only old car I keep around a couple of classics. One I bought when I was 16 and still have. And then I have, modern stuff. And yeah, I'll admit it, I drive a Tesla too. So
okay, awesome. And what's the old classic?
1966 Triumph Spitfire.
Oh my God.
And that's a lot of fun. Little convertible, 2-seater, work on it yourself, tiny car.
Does that one have the dual carburetors on it?
It does. Yep, it does.
I used to have one of those.
Yeah?
Yes.
It's a tinkerer's dream because you have to tinker with it every day to keep it running.
You have to tinker every day. Yes, I learned a lot more about mechanics than I ever set out to. But that's what having an old British sports car will do for you.
Yeah, pretty much. You spend more time pushing it than driving it. But, I got it when I was 16 and I've never let it go. And it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's wild. That's cool. All right. So you're a tinkering guy, clearly. You're into some subtle stuff as well. How does acupuncture come into your picture?
I had a bit of a different career path like many do. I started out in finance, actually. I got a degree in business management and entrepreneurship and ended up in finance and mortgages and did that for a few years. Found it lucrative and unsatisfying. And so I decided that I needed a change and did a lot of soul searching and ended up going to chiropractic, which had always interested me as well. The mechanics of the body. How do things fit together? How do you get them work? How do you get them adjusted so they work right? If you got to adjust both carburetors and get them balanced, it translates well. And so went to chiropractic school. And from there, got interested in acupuncture and started studying acupuncture as well. And so I was simultaneously doing both. And that's kind of where the story of Acugraph begins, because that's where I got introduced to this originally Japanese technique called Rotoraku that ultimately led into Acugraph and all of that.
Rotoraku, that sounds like some kind of a monster.
Yeah, he ate New York, but Godzilla beat him. No, Rotoraku, interestingly, in fact, I'll tell you the story of Rotoraku because the name is the story. And here's how it goes. In 1950, there's a medical doctor in Tokyo named Yoshio Nakatani. And Dr. Nakatani is interested in electrical properties of the skin. And so he's studying electrical skin resistance and how the skin responds physiologically, and great. And he has some patients that have nephritis. And of course, when you have nephritis, then you get edema around the ankles, right? So patients with swollen ankles. And so he's got electrical probes and he's probing the skin to see how the conductivity is affected when there's edema under the skin. And so he's around the ankles and he's measuring and he finds an area where it conducts electricity a lot better than the surrounding skin. It's like if there were a wire in the skin, he found the wire and that's where the electricity goes. And then he noticed, he could go right up the line and go side to side, either side of this area, it would conduct less electricity, but on the area, it conducts really well. And it's a line. And so he's going, well, there's a line of good conductance. So Ryodo-raku is literally line of good conductance. If you're going to be Japanese and literal about it, what are we going to call this line of good conductance I found? Let's do that. Yeah, I like it.
This is why it's helpful to study some Chinese if you're going to do Chinese medicine, because so many things in Chinese medicine, the name is just what it is. And if you know the Chinese, it's a hell of a lot easier than trying to remember some pinyin kind of thing. because it just is named what it is.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're dealing with here. So he names it what it is, and then he starts developing this because that particular line of good conductance that was going down the inside of the ankle in a patient with nephritis, he looks at a chart and says, well, golly, that's called the kidney meridian. Who would have thought that a nephritis patient would have altered electrical properties in the kidney meridian? And so the light goes on for him, and he says, wait a minute. So is there a link between pathology in the organ, for example, and the electrical property of the meridian? And so he spends his career devoted to this, and he develops a method of measuring the meridians electrically to find out, okay, what's going on in the channels, and is that clinically useful to us? And that kind of inquiry, that kind of curiosity is where Ryotaraku started. To cut to the chase, he developed this method of measuring 24 points, so 12 bilaterally. Most of them were the Yuan source points, and he found that those were electrically kind of the best point to measure because they're very electrically active, and they reflect really well what's going on not only in the channel, but in the actual organ or system too.
Source point, imagine that.
Imagine.
Interesting, isn't it? I mean, that's...
Oh, totally. Yeah, and that's where it came from. Now, back in the day, the way that he would do it, and, this is an audio podcast, so I'll wave my hands around and it won't mean anything, but he would measure using a meter, an old analog meter with a needle on a scale that moves up and down, right? And so take measurements of these points and write them down. And then you take those measurements that you wrote and you draw a chart, which ones are high, which ones are low. And then you kind of, from the highs and lows, right in the middle, you kind of establish, okay, here's the average of everything. Here's kind of the normal range. And then you look at the outliers. What's way above normal or way below normal and why? And that's the genesis. And so for his entire career, and he published on this, he did lots of work. Ultimately, a lot of other practitioners picked it up and it became a big deal in Japan, and it still is. And it went to the rest of the world. But it was always done with an analog meter and a piece of paper.
So you got to be able to do some math, and you got to be able to tune the carburetors, basically.
Yeah, and it was cumbersome. I mean, it would take 15 minutes to do this, and you can do pulses a lot faster than that. And so although it had some advantages, it had some marked disadvantages too. And so what happened to me, I guess kind of to bring the story back to how I got involved, I had a daughter, newborn, while I was in school, and she was having a lot of trouble sleeping and seemed to be, really colicky. And I talked to one of my professors and said, hey, what can be done? What kind of acupuncture can you do on a newborn? Just looking for something to help. And this instructor says, oh, I got this technique. Bring her to my office. And so we went to his office. He pulls out the meter and he does the Ryotaraku measurements on an infant, right? And sure enough, everything measures out. He can pinpoint what's going on. And then he treats with a laser, which we'll talk maybe about lasers too, because I'm really into optics and really into light therapy. But he treats her with a laser and things improve. And, I was glad my daughter got better. But it's confession time, right? I was a lot more excited about what the hell did you just do? What is this? You've got this machine. You're measuring what now? Talk to me about the resistance. Is this ohms? What are we doing? And so he explains it, and I'm like, whoa, that is so cool. But hey, this is the year 2002. Why aren't we using computers? You and I are both old enough to remember Windows 95 and Windows 98. And by 2002, computers weren't, stones. You could do some stuff with computers besides hit someone over the head and kill them. And so I'm going, why are we using a pencil and paper? Because you're taking an electrical measurement and then you're wasting all this time trying to figure this stuff out. And well, I'll tell you what, he said, that's a great idea because I go around the country teaching this technique. And so I have a lot of practitioners that do this. And so if you'll come up with a way to computerize it, whatever you come up with, I'll go recommend it and sell it.
Okay, now you got a marketing department.
And so I should represent it properly. I said, someone should computerize this. And he's like, you're right. Somebody should computerize it. That'd be amazing. And I said, okay, I will. And I didn't even know what came out of my mouth. I've never been a computer programmer, nothing like that.
No, dude, but you built robots when you were a kid. So how hard could it be?
Yeah, but it was all, really analog stuff. But yeah, could I figure it out? Sure. But I'm a student. I don't have time. But what I do have.
And you're a new father. You're kind of busy.
A little bit. But what I do have is a brother who is just about to graduate with a degree in computer science. And I have a good friend from all the way back to elementary school, high school, who was my nerd mentor and far more electrical than me. I would call myself a tinkerer.
So you got a development team to go with your marketing department.
I've got a development team. Yeah. So I literally went out to the parking lot of this clinic I was at, and I called my brother and I said, hey, I just saw the coolest thing and here's what it is. And do you think you could write some software that would do this thing and make these charts? And he's like, well, yeah, I could do that. I said, cool. All right, you're in. And then I called my buddy and said, hey, could you design this thing to interface and talk to the computer so I can get an analog measurement and get it in the computer, talk to the software and make the graphs? And he said, yeah, I can do that. And so by the time I left that parking lot, I had a development team and I told both of them, I'm like, I don't have any money. I can't pay you. I'll cut you in because this guy just said he'll help us sell it. And so if we get this thrown together and get something working, he'll go sell them and we're all in for a cut.
Life can be troublesome and brutal and frustrating and all kinds of things. But on occasion, something like this comes along and it's like, oh my goodness, what an opportunity. And, and it's like you feel it, taste it. Those words were out of your mouth before you even knew you were saying them. I'll do it.
Bingo. That was a watershed moment. I didn't know it at the time, but that moment, those words changed my life and they just came out of my mouth. And so, what's funny? You know how you organize folders on your computer desktop and stuff, and you put things where you can find them. And I have a folder called Adrian's Projects. And so, 20 years ago or 21 years ago, I've just talked to these two guys. We're going to do this thing. And so I put a folder in my projects that's going to be for Acugraph. I didn't call it Acugraph then, but I had a folder because, this is a project, we're going to make some of these. We're going to make like 20, right? We're going to make like 20 of these things and sell them. Well, I'll make a few bucks. Then I'll have one for myself to use because that was really the goal. And then I'll, move on to whatever my next project is. And to this day, my entire business still lives in that folder inside Adrian's Projects. I'm like, this is not a project anymore. This is a career. Maybe I should rethink that, but I'll get to it.
It's funny how these things happen and how you file. I've got my entire Qiological podcast inside my Yongkang Chinese Medicine Clinic folder as a skunkworks project.
Yeah. Well, I hope it turns into something for you.
I've just never moved it out. It's funny. I've never moved it out of there. It's like, there it is.
That's where it lives.
Yeah, it's fine. It's funny how evolution happens, and we actually see this in evolution, where there'll be an innovation of some sort. There'll be some kind of a change, and it comes out of something, but it stays attached to that something it came out of. It doesn't just spring forth like a whole new creation, like Athena from the head of Zeus or something. You can kind of trace it back. So that's great. That's great. It's like, yeah, here's my little project folder. And I'm still working on that project.
Yeah, I'll let you know when it's done. So yeah, we're gonna do this. We're gonna make a few of these things. So, and true to his word, this instructor, as he was going around teaching these seminars on this technique, he's telling his friends, folks that have taken classes from him for a long time and stuff. He's got contacts, and he's telling them, hey, I've got a guy who's developing a computerized version of this, and if you want to commit to buy one now, if you want to get in at the ground floor, then I can put you down for one, kind of pre-order price. When they're ready, you'll get one. It'll be $1,000. And so he went out and he sold 10 of them that way. And he got, basically credit cards standing by for $10,000 if I can produce something that works. And so, so I'm doing this development work, and I've got to buy equipment and pay for stuff and whatever. So I'm running up credit card bills on my cards, getting this done, knowing that when I hit the finish line, I get $10,000 right away to pay off my bills. Didn't quite work out that way. I mean, I got to the finish line, and then I sat down and charged all 10 of those cards one day. And the credit card company who had, it was a new account. I had just set it up for the business. I had never charged anything. And one day I sit down and charge 10 cards for $1,000 a pop. And they screamed fraud and locked my account. And it took a month and a half to get it unlocked and they called every one of those people and, check, did you authorize this? Well, what are you buying from this guy? Well, what the hell is that? And it took a month and a half, but I got my money, and that was that. I think by that time, I'm like, there was enough interest that the first run we made 50 of these things. And I was terrified because I went out on a limb. I spent more than the $10,000 making 50 of these things. And so I was gambling that there'd be more people that wanted one.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code CHEOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Well, that's called being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it turns out.
Because look, entrepreneurs, they hopefully make money, but they're rarely in it to make money. They're in it to make something. They're in it to follow an interest. They're in it because they shot their mouth off and said, I'll do it. I'm the guy. And, maybe you can make some. In fact, you need money to be an entrepreneur. But like if you aim at money because you're an entrepreneur, that's, you should have stayed in finance. There's a lot of risks with the kind of thing you did. But you were just pulled along by the interest in it and the curiosity in it. And, it's fun to have a project that, I wonder if this will work. Could blow up, but it could be awesome. There's something in that delta between like safety and this is a cool idea. I got to see what's up around the corner.
Yeah. And that's so spot on, because the most gratifying thing of all, and these are watershed moments in my life, the most gratifying thing of all, like the first time I have we have a prototype, the wires and stuff all over the desk. I've got pictures of this hooked up to this computer and probe that I've, made myself out of parts and junk. And okay, we get the whole thing up and running, and I stick it on lung 9 and I get a reading on the computer and I get the sounds and everything is correct. And I go through the source points and I'm done and I have a graph. Holy shit, it worked. Not only that, but it's gonna work. And it's so much better than the old analog stuff. Just the proof of concept, that was worth more than all the money I ever made doing it. Just like this moved the needle. This fundamentally changed the profession in my small way, but it mattered.
That's cool. That's a great creation story.
Thanks. But so anyway, yeah, so that's where it came from. And we've developed it continually since then. I actually practiced for 3 years after graduating simultaneously running this business and running the practice. And both were very busy. The practice was growing by leaps and bounds, but the business was growing too. And eventually I had to make a choice. So I sold the practice to another practitioner and stuck with the business full time. Now, lest it sound like an unmitigated success story, it's not. There's always challenges. There's always lean times. There's always difficulties.
That's just having a business.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
And, all successful businesses, I've got this newsletter that I subscribe to from a company. It's an equity company, and it's in Columbia, Missouri, of all places, just right down the road. They're called Permanent Equity. It's an equity company. They buy companies and stuff. But they've got the best damn newsletter because these people are like the Monty Python of investing. They're like super smart people, and they're making good money. But they don't sound like any investment people that I've ever run into before. So I love their newsletter. And one of the things that I read recently, they said, all businesses, even successful businesses, are unmitigated disaster that are waiting for the next thing to go wrong. Even successful businesses. And, it was so reassuring to read that because I think about clinical practice. And there's this idea that, it should be stable. It should, money should always come in. We shouldn't have too many problems. No, it's like, expect problems. There's always problems. Weirdness, downtimes, lean times, strange things. Get used to it. This is how nature works, kids.
Yeah, cycles.
Even for companies that do well. There's always cycles. I think it's so important to remember.
Yeah. And you get to the point where you have enough hindsight and you've survived enough cycles and enough downs and seen enough ups that when the next one hits, you can look in the rearview mirror and say, no, we're going to get through this one too, because that's how it works. We're going to find a way through this, and you do.
And sometimes you just need a little time off, and all you got to do is wait it out. And maybe you've got to make changes, but guess what? You're smarter now than you've ever been.
And sometimes you have to do something so radical and unexpected. COVID hit, and we're all facing lockdowns and stuff. People can't practice. People can't see patients. And I got together with my team here at my company and said, what are we going to do? Because all of our customers are basically out of business at the moment. What are we going to do? Not only for our business, but this is an existential crisis for everyone. So we were brainstorming and came up with the idea, we have this library of CE classes that we've created and that we sell. So people can take a course from us, get some CE credits for license renewal and so on. And we just said, screw it. It's all free. Come and get it because you're stuck home. You can't practice. Get your CE done for the year. We'll just give it to you. And we're all going to get through this together. So we hit our list and hit, everybody and just said, hey, you know what? The whole library, it's free. All the CE credits you can eat, get it done. And it never occurred to us that would be a tremendous, boom, our business blows up after that. Because you get through the cycle, you get through the lean times, COVID's over, everybody's back in business, and they've been taking training on our company and our products during COVID. And so it turned out to be a real benefit, but that's not how we set out. And so sometimes just unexpected stuff happens and you take a gamble and it works. And even if it hadn't worked, the fact that we were able to give all that away was enough for us. The people that were so grateful, that was enough for us.
People in business often get slated as being stingy and money grabbing. You often hear that. Oh, yeah, it's just for money. They're just in it for the money. They're just in business to, get rich. And maybe there's some businesses that are like that. But the thing is, if you want to be a business for any length of time, you got to be someone that people like to do business with. Unless you're a monopoly, a Rockefeller, a Microsoft, the phone company. But for most of us, we're not living in that world. And, the people that we like to do business with are people that we like. And look, if you're in business, most of us like our customers. We want to try to be helpful to them.
Oh, totally. And you know what? We're kind of wandering far and wide, but I want to make 2 points for what you just said. Number one, when I was in business school, my favorite course was an entrepreneurship course. as it was part of my major, and it was taught by a guy who had been there, done that. He bought and sold a dozen businesses, started business, everything. He's independently wealthy, and he's teaching college because he likes it. He doesn't even have to work, but he's teaching because he likes to teach. So cool guy, really liked him. And he said, listen, when you're a real entrepreneur, the money is good for one thing, and that is to keep score. So you know if it's working or not. It's never about the money. It's always about the project or the business or the desire or the goal. You're going to make this work. You're going to make it happen. He said that's why serial entrepreneurs like him, they start businesses, they get them up and running, and once it's humming along and doing well, now I'm bored. Sell that one, do it again, start from scratch, build it. Anyway, the other point I wanted to make was what you said about doing business with people that like you, or doing business with people you like. And that's been a guiding principle for us, because when I started this business, I was a student. The only thing I had going for me, the only reason anyone would do business with me at all is that they're like, I like this guy. I think he's onto something. And so we've kind of kept that. We've always gone out of our way to really treat our customers well. Hey, we're family. We're here to serve you. You're in our tribe now. And so we're going to help you succeed. And by doing that, we're going to succeed too. And so when we have live events and people fly in from all over to come to these live events, it's so gratifying. They're like, man, I feel like I'm home. I'm here with my people. I'm here with my family. You guys are my tribe. So anyway, business philosophy, there we covered it. That's where we're coming from. And I'll tell you that philosophy combined with a good product, you'll be successful.
Well, let's talk about this, the product, air quotes here, the product. How do you use an Acugraph in practice? How would that help someone like me? I'm just, your regular old garden variety. I don't even have a specialty. I'm not interested in having a specialty. I kind of like that, with this Oriental, East Asian, whatever you want to call it, medicine that we practice. All kinds of strange conditions. People with strange conditions can walk through the door. I can kind of puzzle my way through it. It's a lot of fun. I like using the methods that I've got. How would I add in something like an Acugraph? How would that help me to have more fun with my puzzly, inquiring mind as I'm working with patients?
That's a great question. So let's go with that one for a minute. I'm going to talk about you. I'm going to talk about the practitioner. We'll talk about the benefits to the patients later, but to the practitioner, using something like Acugraph gives you more input, more data in that puzzling out equation that you're working with. And the more data you have to work with, the more data points to make up this picture, then the better you can do and the better outcome you can get. So here's an interesting case. I know someone who's been having a lot of stomach pain. They go to the doctor. The doctor says, "Oh, well, we're going to test for H. pylori because, maybe you've got H. pylori, but we're probably also going to do a scope, an endoscope. And so we're going to take a look down there and see what's going on with your stomach." Right. And so, by the way, while we're down there doing the endoscope, you know what they're going to test for? H. pylori. Because if you're doing an endoscope and you don't also test for H. pylori, you're missing an important piece of data that might need to be there. And so you're going to, more data is always better.
And you're already there.
Exactly. So when a patient comes in and you're already doing pulses and tongue and questions and everything you're doing, and by investing 3 more minutes in an Acugraph exam, you get an entirely different electrical perspective and objective evidence and tracking for how things have objectively changed over time because you have multiple exams over multiple visits. All of that put together is a huge treasure trove of additional data about this patient for you. So could you practice without Acugraph? Of course. That's only happened for thousands of years. But you could also practice without an X-ray machine and set broken bones 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago. But given the choice between no X-ray machine and the X-ray machine with a broken bone, I'm going to say do the X-ray too. and then set the bone.
I would too, because the really amazingly, wickedly skilled old bone setters, they're just not around like they used to be. We've kind of lost that.
We kind of have, and that's part of what I like about Acugraph, and that's one of the things that people get concerned about, to be honest. They say, well, wait a minute, is this some kind of replacement for my finely honed skills? Well, no, of course it's not. It can never replace you. All it's doing is giving you more data.
Dang, I was hoping lazy me could just turn it over to the machine.
It's acupuncture for dummies. I'll admit it. You're right. Put in a quarter and boom, you get out a cure. No, I'm kidding. So
how real time is this? Because one of the things that I have found over the years of practice is I've often got a really great idea on what will be helpful to a patient. And so I'll put a needle in, maybe two, and then I go back and I check the pulse, and I'm hoping I'm going to see a positive change. Sometimes I do, and it's like mind-blowing, like, holy shit, that liver pulse it's back, right? I had one this morning. No liver pulse, 2 needles. Wow, liver pulse. That's cool. But sometimes I go and I check something. It's like, no, actually, that was a bad idea. Those 2 points I just put in and I thought would be good for them. No, their pulse is terrible and their complexion's starting to change and not look so great. So, sometimes you're wrong. You have a great idea and it's wrong. How real time is the Acugraph? Would it be possible to put a few needles in, go and test and see, oh yeah, look, that meridian has some flow now?
It would be, and actually that's been the subject of a lot of research. Years ago, we got an NIH grant and built a machine for that purpose where you could actually hook it up to all the UON source points at once. So they've got electrodes taped all over. It's like for lab work, just to see if that was a viable thing. And we did, we got our grant, we did our study and so on. We did that in conjunction with the university. That was a lot of fun. But ultimately what we find is that the most clinically relevant information when it comes to electricity, when it comes to electrical skin resistance, which is what you're measuring, is once you've treated a patient, you've put in needles, you've done whatever you're going to do, the meridian systems are reacting and changing. Chi is moving, stuff's happening. And so if you do the exam, you measure all 24 points, you treat somebody, and then you measure all 24 points again, you will see, yes, changes in real time, but you'll also, you won't see where it's going. You'll see that you've stirred up the soup, but you've got to wait at least one horary cycle for everything to get where it's going and to settle back in. And so what we recommend is, rather than trying to do it real time, is take the snapshot now before you treat. Take the measurements at the beginning of the session, do your treatment, send them home, and then at the beginning of next session, take another exam, take another snapshot, so to speak, and see what has changed. And we've found over the course of hundreds of thousands of times doing this, we found that you get a very reliable pattern where you can see, yep, there's that, and here it's getting a little better, and look at that, it's gone. And you can actually watch it over the course of 4 visits or 6 or 2 or whatever it's going to be. And so that really is the kind of the best way to use it that way.
That might be a more early warning signal. The electrical conductivity on the skin, that's moving at a different rate, so to speak. And like you were saying, you need a horary cycle to really start to see changes in that. That makes sense. Look, we've got these different rhythms and cycles in the body, and some are fast and some are not as fast. So this one's a little bit like diurnal, right? It's like you need a cycle of a day. When you say horary cycle, you mean like the cycle of a day.
The cycle of the day, yeah. And and it's complicated by, okay, I promise this will be the my one really nerdy comment, and then we'll be back to less nerdy. But
we're okay with nerdy. I like nerdy.
So the deal is, when you put electricity into the skin, which you're doing with Acugraph, it's a very tiny current, but it's an electrical current, and you're putting it through each meridian. That's how you measure how well chi's flowing in the meridian. But it's going in at the skin because guess what? We're all enclosed in skin. So you have no choice but to put that electricity through the skin to get to the meridian. Skin reacts to electricity. And so what you end up having happen, because the skin is a capacitor. And that's why I said it was getting nerdy. A capacitor stores charge, but it's very temporary and fleeting. Like a battery stores charge long term, right? A capacitor stores charge for a second or for a few seconds or a few minutes, and then it discharges and it's gone.
Short-term storage.
Short-term storage, yeah. So when you measure a point and you're putting electricity into that point, now it's charged up. And now I go back to measure it again 5 minutes later or 2 minutes later, and guess what? I'm measuring a charged up point. So now the skin is confounding me. And this is well studied. This is well established in the science. And so the point is, the first measurement is the good one. That's the reliable one.
So you just spoke to something that drove me crazy as a student studying Japanese acupuncture. School that I went to, we studied different forms of acupuncture. We learned TCM, and we learned some French barrier points, and we learned all kinds, Korean hand acupuncture. We learned all kinds of stuff. And one of the things we learned was Japanese acupuncture, palpatory-based meridian therapy. And the thing about that is you're touching to gain information, but as you put your hands on the patient, they are already changing because you can't assess without also putting some input into the system. Exactly what you're talking about. We're using a very gentle palpatory method in Japanese acupuncture or meridian therapy, at least the way I was taught it. But you got to be a little careful because that's going to start changing things. So it's like in the beginning, you can get a clearer sense, but as you move into it, well, now we're like in mid-treatment. That, boat has already left the dock. So it's different. It's moving. And so your thoughts here about the capacitor capabilities of points and about how using the diagnostic also changes the system, that makes a lot of sense. And look, with Chinese medicine, acupuncture in particular, we know that very, very small stimulations can have a big effect on the body. So, yeah, it makes sense that the diagnostics that you're doing with something involving electricity, that's already starting to change things. Which brings me to a question. Can you also use this thing to treat?
It does not treat. So it will show you, it'll give you the picture, the graphs and charts showing you objectively the electrical properties of the meridians. And it will even give recommended points to treat based on Japanese meridian therapy or based on some other approaches. There's 6 different approaches where you can say, I want recommendations based on this approach. And it will say, that would be this set of points. And you can decide if you want them or not. But ultimately, for treating, that's still you. You're going to use needles, or if you're a non-needle practitioner, you're going to use whatever you use, laser or acupressure or whatever. So it's not a treating device. It's just informational. Oh, and I wanted to mention, by the way.
And does it have blinky lights on it? That's the important question.
There is one blinky light, but it's inside. But yeah, you know what? The next one will have more. No, but the point I wanted to make is that this gets to the heart of why acupuncture research is challenging when you're trying to do placebo, because there is no acupuncture placebo. They say, we're going to have a non-puncturing needle and we're going to put it on the point. So the patient's going to be touched. The point is going to be touched. The point is going to be pressed on. They're going to feel like the needle punctured the skin, but it didn't, and they won't know that. Okay, so what you've done is isolated the active event or the active ingredient as puncture. That's what you've done, because everything else is there except puncture. How do you know puncture is what make acupuncture work? What if it's the touching the point and the attention that's paid to it? So that's the problem.
You got people using teishin needles that can get very, very strong effects. Never pierce the skin.
Never pierce. So the definition of placebo is an identical treatment minus the active ingredient. And so with a pill, it's the same color, it's in the same package, it has the same words on it, but the chemical inside is missing the active ingredient. With a pill, you can make a placebo. Until you can tell me the active ingredient in acupuncture, you've invalidated every acupuncture placebo study ever done. But anyway, I digress. You get me going on that, and that's a whole topic.
Let's just hang with that for just a second. And then I want to talk about when we eventually wind around to lasers here. The interesting thing about placebo is that they've been doing research lately with on-label placebo, where doctors are actually handing out pills, telling the patients, this is a placebo. They're not blinding it. They're putting it up front. Guess what? They still get better. So is it the handing it to the patient? Is it the patient thinking about it as they ingest it? Is it something about the relationship of two people with an exchange? Is it something about being listened to? There's some great questions that come out of this.
And those answers are so important because I'm just going to say it like it is. Okay, here we are. For every idiot out there screaming that acupuncture is just a placebo and putting that in misleading headlines and practicing journalistic malpractice, for every idiot out there doing that, there are those who recognize that we haven't begun to understand what is actually happening here in that exchange you talked about. But what we do know is that until you've identified that, you can't say there's a placebo. And what we also know is that placebo is so powerful as a healing method that we ought to be capturing it. If touching the patient gives you better results than not touching the patient for something unrelated to touching, touch the patient. I don't care if you know the mechanism. If it gets better results, do it. And so I teach a course called Embracing Placebo, and we talk about the need for, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to get the best results. If I have to dance around with a dead chicken, I will, because I'm about getting the patient better. So anyway, that maybe that doesn't do me much scientific credit, but so much of the science out there is bull.
Well, I don't know about that. Look, Ted Kapchuk, author of The Web That Has No Weaver, his thing these days is studying placebo at Harvard. And look, there's a lot to it. So, yeah, I'm just going to look at it as, a new frontier.
Oh, and we should. We really, really should. Because now that we know that if you give someone a pill and tell them it's a placebo and it still works, that ought to be setting off alarm bells going, why do we have active ingredients at all? Because the active ingredient more often does the harm, right? So let's talk about, what's everything else that's doing to make it work? But I don't want to belabor that. I wanted to make that point. And I wanted to mention, in fact, watch this segue. All right, here we go. We're going to segue from there into how Acugraph affects the patient. We talked about how it helps the practitioner, but I want to just mention how it affects the patient, because think about your typical Western-minded patient who's got the paradigm in their head that you go to the doctor, they do some tests, they give you some pills, or they, you're going to need a surgery or whatever. They prescribe a treatment, you go get the treatment, and hopefully you get better. And that's what you expect as somebody raised in this Western paradigm. And since we're here in the United States, that's basically all of us, even those of us who think we aren't. We really, really are. And so somebody comes to you for acupuncture and you take their pulse. Oh, yeah, familiar with that. They take my pulse when I go to the doctor, only you're still weird and do it by hand. And why are you doing both wrists?
And why are you taking so long, right?
Yeah. And then you look at the tongue. Yeah, okay, stick out your tongue. That's a doctor thing. I get it. And next thing, you've done two things. You've looked in my mouth and you've taken my pulse, and you're telling me about my liver. I mean, I'm no medical doctor, but what the hell do you know about my liver? You've taken my pulse. You can maybe tell me about my heart. The point is, and so then we go into a song and dance trying to explain liver qi stagnation or whatever issue, mysterious East Asian medicine concepts we're going to get into.
It very quickly becomes waving a dead chicken.
It does. And patients have zoned out already because they're, sorry, I was staring at my phone there. You didn't see that, but I was illustrating that our attention spans are now measured in seconds. Thank you very much to every freaking social media app that's engineered to hit the dopamine button, every few seconds. And so you're trying to explain this stuff to them about what's going on with their spleen qi, and they really want to know two things. They walked in your door. They took a leap of faith. They took a risk to go see the acupuncturist because they want to know two things that their medical doctor couldn't tell them. And the two things are, what's wrong with me and can you help me? That's it. That's what they're interested in. That's why they walked in your door. And so they don't want to hear something about how their spleen chi is misting their heart. Or pretty soon you've lost them and they come home and
they think they've got a problem. Yeah, I got a liver problem. I had no idea.
Yeah. And you've probably at least heard of the experience, if not had the experience of a patient gets freaked out, runs off to their medical doctor, gets a battery of tests, and then you're an idiot because their liver's fine, at least on, the enzymes or whatever they're going to test, right? So my point in telling you all that is just this. Instead of that paradigm of sandals and candles and ancient Chinese secrets, they walk in and they get a computerized test. They already love and trust technology more than their own children. They already will believe technology more than they'll believe you. And their paradigm is blown up because they thought they were going to go see Mr. Miyagi. And instead, they're seeing someone who says, yeah, I've got a computerized system here. We're going to run a couple of tests. Hey, this sounds like what I'm familiar. Computers and tests. This sounds trustworthy. And then 3 minutes later, you've got the results and you're pointing to something visual. They can see it. They don't have to exercise faith and believe in something you're telling them. But yeah, look right here. See this? See how it's out of balance with all these others? This is called your liver meridian. And this explains why you're having these headaches, because where it runs, and you've got charts and pictures, and you can say, yeah, so I know what's wrong with you and I know how to fix it. Shall we get started? That whole process took 3 minutes, 4 minutes, you're done. They believe you, they trust you, they like you, and they walk out going, holy cow, acupuncture is way more scientific and technological and cool than I thought. Like, this is a real thing. This isn't some weird. Now, the cool part is you're using the ancient medicine. You're using the wisdom of the ages. That's how you're getting them better. But they don't know that. All they know is, yeah, acupuncture is modern, it's scientific, and it's trustworthy. And next time I go in, there's going to be another one of those graphs that's going to show me how I've changed. So now I not only know that it's modern and scientific and trustworthy, but I also know it's working because I've seen visual proof. Even if the symptoms haven't responded yet, I know I'm on the right track because I can look at the report and say, hey, we're doing great. It's already changing. We're going to get some really good results with you. You are in the right place.
And how often do we as the practitioner notice some kind of a smaller, subtle change? Or how often does the patient come back and go, I slept really good for 2 nights. As a practitioner, I'm thinking, great, they have the capacity and they're already a little bit different because they had 2 good nights of sleep. So they're different. In my mind, they're different. Plus, they've got capacity. That's even more important. They got some Zheng Qi, they got some Yuan Qi. But because now they're not sleeping as well, they think nothing has changed, even though they slept 2 good nights.
Yeah, they came to you for their headaches, and if they don't notice that they're sleeping better or the digestion's working or whatever, then they will think, I still have headache. Yeah, I tried acupuncture. That shit doesn't work. Because I went twice. I still have a headache.
Well, again, we have to look at, is it the same headache? Are you getting them as frequently? Are they as intense? I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we help our patients to actually pay attention to their own dang experience.
And this is my point, that for those who, in this gross mindset of instant gratification that we're so steeped in here, that's Acugraph plays to the strength of that. Because if they don't know that the headache is different, or they don't realize they're sleeping better, or whatever, all of these other things, they've got one endpoint only, and they're looking at the one endpoint. And so we take the endpoint, instead of it being the symptom I came in for, the endpoint is now, let's look at your graph. We're watching in real time how your body is changing. And as we bring everything into balance, everything's going to get better. And so it's amazing to watch patients when you do the exam, and it takes 3 minutes, and boom, the graph is up on the screen, and they're going, they're waiting with bated breath, waiting for it to pop up on the screen, and they see it, and they're like, yes, look at that. The liver, and they're teaching you about what's going on. That's when you know you've won. that's when you know, okay, yeah. And this isn't uncommon. This is extremely common that patients are watching for the balance to improve. That's their new endpoint.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner, because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital chi, and that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
Well, I suspect that their headache or their sleep or whatever is actually the endpoint. But what you've got here is a tool to help them get from point A to point B with some confidence.
There it is. Well put. Yeah. And I would agree with that. They still are looking for the symptom relief, and they're going to get the symptom relief, but maybe it's going to take 4 or 5 visits. And maybe instead of stopping after 2, they're going to keep coming because they're getting the feedback that says this is working.
Cool. Okay.
Hey, you want to talk lasers? Sorry, I go off on tangents, but I wanted to get that out because it's so vital, so important.
Yeah, no, I can see that. You know, part of getting people better is to help them see that they're making some kind of progress so that they'll stick with the program. And sometimes it's 3 or 4 treatments, and sometimes it's 10. 10 is a tough go. You know, that's a big commitment of time and money. And depending on what they have going on, you know, that's added in as well. But if there's something that you're seeing as the patient that helps you have some confidence, and look, as a practitioner, I haven't worked with one of these, but as a practitioner, I'd be really curious to see, you know, look, on occasion, I really screw up a treatment and someone comes back and they're worse. That'd be kind of fun to pop an Acugraph on that. It's like, all right, what actually happened here? It sounds like it could be useful for troubleshooting when you went the wrong way.
Well, not only that, but when I teach this to our practitioners and I say, because I'm a proponent of, I do graph every visit, just that's how I start the visit. And patients like it because you're being very conscientious and you're monitoring closely. But the practitioners, the light bulb will eventually come on and they'll say, wait a minute, what if the graph gets worse? And the patient will see they got worse. I say, you look the patient in the eye, you get that serious look on your face and you say, boy, it's a good thing we checked, isn't it? Because now we know, and sometimes things get worse before they get better, but this is why we monitor so closely. So we can tell if your body's not responding well to what we did last time, we can change instantly. We know that. So don't be afraid.
I've got a clinic tip for all y'all out there. For when you do the wrong treatment and they get worse, own up. You know what? I was wrong about that. And I know that I'm wrong because of these symptoms being like this being like that, this other thing that's now happening to you. Right? I could easily, if I was using an Acugraph, I could look at it and go, I see where I went wrong on that. Had a good idea, was not the right idea. And being able to own up to, I'm doing my best, but sometimes I don't get it. However, because we just went down the wrong way, I know more about how to help you. I know not to go that way, right? These things happen. And if you're okay with your own fallibility and you can share that with a patient, I have found that it tends to bring a lot more trust.
And that's so missing in our healthcare system.
For sure.
yeah, not being willing to own up to, hey, yeah, I gave you that drug. It did terrible things. Oops. There are no adverse effects of the COVID vaccine, right? Anyway, don't get me started on all that. I'm sorry. Let's
That could be another podcast, but we'll save that for another day because let's talk a little bit about lasers.
Yeah.
Speaking of blinky lights.
Yes, sir.
I've had a few people on to talk about lasers, and I don't understand this stuff real well. They seem kind of magical. Look, I grew up with Star Trek, and they had that little lasery thing that they'd, wave on you and McCoy's sick bay, and, you'd heal bones and stuff. So there's that. Actually, I do have I've got a very specific question now that I think about it. Okay. I recently have been testing this really cool new device. I call it the Moxa wand. It's like really new. And by the time this airs, it's, probably be like fairly widely available, but it's still kind of new. And what this company has done, I'm so glad I can talk to a geek about this. So this is really cool. It's an electric device, and it has the like far infrared signature of burning Moxa. All right. Because, there's something about Moxa that gives it that deep penetrating. I think it's far infrared, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's the wavelength specifically. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a very specific far infrared wavelength. Okay. Very specific to Moxa. I can't really use Moxa in my practice because I've got weak lungs. I've always had weak lungs ever since I was a little kid. It's the thing that took me to acupuncture, actually. And my lungs are better, but, I protect my lungs. So I can't really do Moxa in my clinic. And plus, the smell, some people really like it, but like all day long, right? And patients sometimes don't like the smell of it. And then it gets in their clothes, and then they got to go back to work, and people think they've been smoking dope. And I actually had to write a note for a patient once that, because I use a little Moxa, not a lot, that, she smells the way she does because of a treatment from her acupuncturist, because she had to go back to work at a hospital.
Well, it wasn't token up at lunch.
Not token up at lunch. Anyway, I've been using this device that is smokeless. It has heat. It actually is warm. It's Moxa without the smoke. I swear to God, it's Moxa without the smoke. And you can use it like pole Moxa, or it's got like a little concentrator tip. You could do it with like little Japanese, Moxa rice cone, like little Moxa grains. You can do it in a number of different ways. And what I have found in my work with this, in the short time that I've had it, I'm seeing Moxa results from this thing. Now, again, we're not burning any Moxa. We're dealing with a far infrared frequency that is Moxa or mimics Moxa, right? It's effectively Moxa. So, you know something about lasers. I just shared with you this Moxa wand thing. Like, what's going on with this? What is going on with these far infrared frequencies and how they interact with the body? Because this thing works, and my patients love it.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to step outside of lasers for a minute and into the realm of far infrared. Far infrared lasers are a problem because the wavelengths of infrared, we can't see them. We can't perceive them as light. They are light, but we can't see them because our eyes aren't tuned to those wavelengths. But our body does have a sensor system that can feel that light, and that is, of course, we feel it as heat. It is far infrared is heat, and it's deep penetrating heat. That wavelength, because it's such a long wavelength, then it tends to penetrate deeper into the tissue. This is just the straight physics of it. And so far infrared, it's deep penetrating, and it has a number of beneficial effects. The primary one is actually that it dilates blood vessels and increases local micro and macro circulation, as well as lymph circulation in the area. Now, that doesn't necessarily account for the good acupuncture, air quotes, acupuncture effects, the meridian-based effects. But that's why having moxa at an acupoint means that it's going to penetrate into the point, it's going to put energy in, and it's going to do it over a period of time. Like if you're burning moxa on a point, then you have I'll call it long term, but from seconds to minutes, somewhere in that range of energy being put into the system in that area and then going through the meridian system to do what it needs to do. Most needles, when you put a needle in a point, if you just put it in there and leave it, it's passive. It's an antenna. Okay. It's going to gather what it can gather as an antenna, but it's rather slow. You may manipulate the needle to try to put more energy into the system at that point, and you may have a stronger or faster effect. Moxa is a step above that because it's putting that energy in a wavelength instead of mechanical energy that the body has to convert to something that it can use energetically. It's putting in a very compatible wavelength. And I told you that to tell you this.
Easily digestible.
Yeah, there you go. It's easily digestible. It's what the body wants. Doesn't have to translate it.
It's a carbohydrate.
Yeah. But the step I'll go further is I've done things with far infrared for a lot of years. I love far infrared. Everything from saunas to various approaches to moxa to what I do now is jade. And natural jade stone, it has a superpower that if you heat it up, it will take whatever wavelength you put into it to heat it up, and it will translate it, and it will output far infrared. It does the translating for the body. It's magic.
Wait, are you saying it's a capacitor?
Well, sort of. It's more of a transformer, let's call it, if we're going to get electrical. Taking one frequency or one wavelength and converting it to a different one. And that's a close enough analogy. But here's the practical analogy. One of the products I've developed is a jade mat that's the entire tabletop for the table your patient lays on. It's got natural jade stones, discs, and so it's heated up with, use electrical energy to heat this table mat, and it heats up the jade stones, and it's outputting, the entire table is outputting far infrared. And so the patient's laying on it, and their entire system is being charged with more chi. There's more to work with, because it's filling all the channels as they lay on the table. Plus, it feels great. It feels heavenly. And so the trick, though, there's a lot of those out there. The trouble is that they're using AC power, they're plugged into the wall. And so you have a lot of EMFs, a lot of electromagnetic fields that are biologically incompatible, wrong frequency, screwing up the patient. And there's no point in putting them on the table and then microwaving them with EMFs. So what we developed is a completely EMF-free tabletop jade heater. We call it the Jade Vitality, that they can lay on this jade mat. It's super comfortable, and there's no EMFs because we have the whole thing done with carbon heating elements instead of copper.
You are so geeky. That is just geeky as hell, man.
It is, but it's so cool.
How is it that jade has this project? Is there something about like the structure of jade, or its, geological, like what is it about jade other than, look, jade in Chinese culture, that's the stone, man. People wear it for protection. They wear it for luck. Jade it's a mojo rock.
And it's because it's magic. They've known for millennia.
It's because it's magic. Well, that's because it's magic.
Well, and you said, what is it about it? And, I don't know how long you want to talk today, but we're just about to the Holy Grail. And you keep asking questions that are leading there. So I don't know if you want to get there or not, but I'll talk, just answer the question about jade. And that is this, that the crystalline structure of the jade, it's down to the molecular structure of the crystalline matrix that makes up the stone. And at that scale, you can call it quantum effects if you want, but quantum is often a word that gets used for weird magic I can't understand.
Yeah, look, when I hear quantum, generally speaking, it's like, okay, so it's a little bit out there. I haven't heard a good definition of it. It's like, what are we actually talking about? What does quantum actually mean? Other than, the universe, string theory, Big Bang. I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
Yeah, you know what? We should do this again and we'll get into it. But I'll just say this. That's why I said I'm not going to use that word quantum, because it's such a misused term. What I am going to say is at the molecular level, when you have other wavelengths come in and interact with with the molecules, it causes the molecules to vibrate. And they vibrate at the correct frequency to output the far infrared wavelengths. And so essentially...
And which wavelengths are these? How do they compare to, say, Moxa?
Very similar. And I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but very similar, because far infrared is a range, but it's a pretty tight range. And anything in that range has that effect. Just like there's a lot of shades of red, but you would call them all red, and they would all have a red effect. You know, the Ferrari looks good in several shades of red. So it's like that.
Yeah, but the green isn't so great. I don't like the green ones. The red ones are nice.
Red ones are all right. Yeah. So anyway, that's what jade does. And so even if you wear it on your body and your body heat heats it up, you give it body heat of whatever wavelength, and it reflects back far infrared to you, which is why people wear it, part of the mythology, I'll call it mythology, but it's really science, part of the ancient science of jade. Now, imagine that times 100 or times 300, because you're laying on 300 polished jade discs that are being heated and outputting just wonderful far infrared. And we have smaller ones like for your knee or for your shoulder, or for both shoulders, you can wear like a warm blanket. And it's a product that we've sold for a decade now, and people just love it. It's practitioners even sell these to their patients to take home and use. And then it has actual, physiological healing effects, increased circulation, increased lymph flow, things like that. But we talk about the acupuncture effects. When you've opened the channels so things are flowing more freely and there's more chi to work with, you have a much better chance of getting great results.
All right, that's really interesting. I had no idea that you guys had that as a product. I was just wanting to try to better understand this magic Moxa wand that I've been playing with.
It sounds really cool.
It's hot, let me tell you. It's really hot. It's cool. It's hot.
Well, and you said you didn't know we had that, and I'm not trying to make a sales pitch here, because I love to talk about the science, but that's what drives our company. Our whole shtick, if we have a shtick, is that we sell technology devices that are acupuncture, not just acupuncture compatible, but that are acupuncture synergistic, that work with the Meridian system to make everything work better. So whether that's Acugraph or lasers or Jade Vitality that we talked about, or some of our other products, they're all in that same vein of what can we do that will complement acupuncture to make it more effective, better results in the end. And that's the niche that we occupy. We don't sell needles.
Yeah. Well, you don't need to. You're doing other things. Yeah, again, niches are great. Again, I had no idea that you had these. So what it does for me is it makes me even more curious about far infrared. So look, we need to wind this thing down at this point. But at another time in the future, it'd be fun to come back together and talk more about, here's what I want to talk about. I want to get really, besides dual carburetors, because when you can tune a dual carburetor on an old Spitfire, oh man, it feels so good.
It's satisfying, that's for sure.
It's very satisfying. Of course, the weather changes and you got to retune it, but that's just the way it is. At any rate, I am intensely curious these days about far infrared. Okay, far infrared. I want to know more about it, partly because of what you were just talking about with jade. And I think about all the cultural things that go along with jade, and partly just because of my experience with this Moxa thing. I'd be curious to know more about lasers as well. So let's come back and talk about some more geeky stuff on another day.
Love it. And when we do that, I've got something that is the coolest thing I've found that we'll also talk about that's along the same lines. So along far infrared lasers, it's light stuff. We'll get into light. We'll get into a little bit of physics, and it'll be a lot of fun.
It'll be fun. And can we talk about red light too? Because red light seems to be like a thing these days.
Absolutely. Love to.
Okay. All right. Adrian, this has been a blast. What can I say? I'm a guy that likes blinky lights. You are too.
I am too. And I've had a great time, Michael. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the opportunity to just, sit and have this conversation. Loved it and look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, man. We'll geek out.
Sounds good.
I'm kind of old school, so things like the Acugraph never really caught my attention. But I'm also a bit of a geek when it comes to tech. I like tools. Everything from well-made screwdrivers to electric cars, so hearing about how the Acugraph can give us another way of paying attention to what might be going on with our patients, it might be worth considering. And when it comes to tinkering, well, I'm all for that. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.